South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivered his midterm budget policy statement for the 2025-26 period on Tuesday. Godongwana spoke on progress since the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the AfCFTA to strengthen multilateralism and regional cooperation. He also spoke about South Africa's G20 presidency, which will end next week. Godongwana pointed out that the significant strides have been made to strengthen macroeconomic fundamentals of debtor countries, many of them African. And for more on this, we're now joined by Olebogeng Ramatlhodi, who's a partner for Indirect Tax at Deloitte Africa, and he joins us now. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Morning, Peter. Good morning to your viewers, and thank you for having me.
All right, let's start with your thoughts on the minister's mini budget. Did it strike the right balance, do you think, between fiscal consolidation and supporting economic growth?
I mean, yesterday, as I was listening to the minister deliver his MTBPS speech, I was pleasantly surprised. And I do think that sometimes we need to give credit where it's due. If one compares the previous speeches, probably from 2008 onwards, those were riddled with a lot of promises that were often not delivered on. They were not as substantive as I found this particular one to be. And there were a few surprises that were landed that when I read the business day from this morning, one already sees the markets responding quite positively to the news that were delivered. For example, business day reports that we potentially can expect a rate cut by next week, as well as an upgrade from Standard & Poor. The rand is apparently has strengthened by 0.3% overnight on news of the MTBPS as delivered by the minister. The question still remains whether the projected 1.8% growth next year and 2% the year after is realistic or not. If one measures these projections against how we have performed as a country in the past, I suppose since 2015, one does understand when analysts are saying that it's probably on the optimistic side, that we should probably be pegging it at between 1% and 1%, and keeping 1.8% as aspirational. A lot of that depends on.
Any progress is great, but with the way the population is growing, and I seem to remember a few years ago, for us to make meaningful progress, we really need to be growing at about 5 to 6%. So because we've been growing so slowly, we start to celebrate these small gains. But we need to be making bigger jumps, though.
Fully agree. I mean, that I fully accept. The reality of the matter is that we live in a country where historical performance has always been disappointing. The growth that we're seeing this particular year surpasses the one last year and the years before. And one needs to be realistic around what the country is able to achieve. You must remember that next year is elections year, and with elections comes populism, and some of the structural reforms that we require as a country to start realizing growth percentages north of 3.5%, which is the minimum that we need. We need to really be bold with the types of reforms that we're supposed to implement. There are a couple that are on the offering, but But we need to be very dedicated and committed to implementing those for us to start making a dent that will see us realizing those type of growth percentages. But having said that, reality and pragmatism dictates that it is highly unlikely that we'll reach those growth percentages in the next 5 years.
You're a tax expert, and
growth.
most South Africans, when they listen to the finance minister, one of the things that they think about is tax. And I wonder if there were any clues about what tax might look like in the new year. Increases, maybe. What did you glean, or were there any clues about what's lying ahead?
So, as a tax expert, when you don't hear the minister saying anything about taxes, I suppose you get disappointed because you've got a lot less to talk about. But having said that, the minister, I think, alluded to the principle that says, like any other family establishment, if you spend more than you make, you have to borrow. You have to generate additional income. And in the form of a state, that additional income has to come from taxes. And hence, you are saying that all things being equal, we are unlikely to see taxes in the new financial year. But for instance, if revenue from a SARS perspective declines, then there is a high likelihood that considerations will have to be put on the table for tax increases, either in the form of VAT, fuel levy, and these are the two that have been spoken about over the past few years. But if you listen to the minister of the commissioner of SARS, he was saying that in his experience, revenue performance is stronger in the second part of the year than it usually is in the first part. In that way, giving confidence that we can expect that SARS will conclude their financial year strong, and that the 2 trillion rand that has now been set for them is more than likely to be achieved. So it is against that backdrop that I don't foresee that there would be any proposals for tax increases in the new financial year.
All right, that sounds like great news. So the minister also highlighted progress under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And I wonder, from an economic and tax perspective, are we seeing meaningful benefits yet, or is the pace still a little slow in this area?
So, I mean, last week I was in Accra, and we were joined at our tax conference by Wam Kelemene. And he was talking about the progress that they are seeing being made where the AfCFTA implementation is concerned. I mean, the GTI initiative now has over 30 members who have joined them. Unfortunately, only 8 are currently training between them, including South Africa. So the buying into the program has been very slow, but there are promising signs that more and more entities are making use of this particular trade agreement. The question still remains with regards to the awareness that the Secretariat is creating for the men on the street and the small and medium enterprises, because the feedback that we have been receiving is that people are either not aware of the program itself, or the fact that there are some countries that have started trading under the initiative. But overall, I think a great initiative that, especially when one looks at the geopolitical tensions between SA and the current US administration, that the continent now needs to pivot and look for markets elsewhere. And I think and strongly believe that the AfCFTA does present that opportunity for us to pivot. Not only as a country,
we've run out of time, but very briefly, perhaps, just finally, what should ordinary South Africans take away from the mini budget yesterday?
I think the the takeaways are that we are beginning to see a shift in the right direction in the form of fiscal discipline. There's a shift to invest more on infrastructure, whether we talk about water, electricity, or logistics in general. There is a shift to make sure that we have built a capable state. And these things in the medium to long term are going to result in those positives. There is still going to be pain in the short term, but it's all in the name of trying to build for the future. Because substantive growth requires difficult decisions to be made, and those often would have negative impacts at the onset. But when one looks into the horizon, there are positives that one can see and look forward to.
Olebogeng, thank you so much indeed. It's not often that we feel a little better after listening to a finance minister, but thank you so much indeed for taking us through your thoughts on Minister Ramatlhodi's mini budget.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was Olebogeng Ramatlhodi, who's a partner for Indirect Tax at Deloitte Africa, talking to us about the mini budget presented by South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana yesterday.
From Africa's broadcast capital.